many of you who know what SVC is, but I got to believe there are a few of you who aren't quite sure. So I wanted just to give you a little bit of background on what is this SVC thing, and then we'll get into it. So the little yellow star you're looking at, or hopefully you're looking at it, that is where we are. And if we look out this way, there's Elliott Bay. And if we could look behind us, we would see Amazon headquarters. We'd see a big facility that Google has here in Seattle. The list kind of goes on and on. Facebook has a big presence here. Apple is opening a presence here. Microsoft, of course, in the eastern suburb of Seattle. Nordstrom.com, REI.com, Zillow, Redfin. It is a true tech center here. And that's significant because of, well, I'll tell you in just a second. While I'm telling you, though, this would be kind of fun. If you would, please drop into the chat your answers to these questions. Where are you? What time is it where you are? And just out of curiosity's sake, how did you learn about this event? So while you're doing that, I'm going to finish the story. So these people are the founders of the school. The school was founded 52 years ago by Dick Brown and Cherry Brown, who you see circled there. They were both commercial illustrators. And this is the work, some of the work that Cherry Brown did. She was for years the go-to fashion illustrator for women's apparel at Nordstrom. And her stuff is, just fabulous, or I should say was. And her husband, Dick, was more this painterly style of commercial illustrator. He would get commissions from big New York publishers and national magazines. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Communication Arts Magazine. They did a 9-page spread on Dick, so that kind of gives you some sense of his authority. Well, they were teaching at a school here in Seattle called Cornish College of the Arts, and they were the only working professionals. And they had heard at this time, and the places, the year was 1969, about how the School of Visual Arts in New York had started experimenting with this notion of like, what happens if you don't have lifelong educators do the teaching, but working professionals? And they thought that was a pretty cool idea, being working professionals themselves. And so 2 years later, in 1971, they started up the School of Visual Concepts. And now we know where the name came from, based on that theory. And so over those 52 years, lots has changed. We don't teach commercial illustration anymore, but we certainly have stuck by their original concept borrowed from School of Visual Arts, which is to have working professionals do the teaching. And these are just some of the folks that are teaching in our programs right now. And whether you know them by name or not, I think you can get the picture that these are very senior people working at really top firms. And many of them are names you might recognize actually, because they've written books on subjects relevant to content design or UX design, or they're on the lecture circuit speaking at a lot of the conferences. So those are the kind of people that, thanks to the idea that Dick and Cherry borrowed, we're still bringing to our students today. And don't memorize this, and there will not be a test, but these instructors are showing up now to help us help our students put portfolios together in content design and UX design. And if you stick around to the very end, I'll briefly, and I promise you it'll be brief, cover this program for you and explain how that works. So that's for later. But that's what SVC is, 52 years of helping people hopefully fulfill their career wishes. So speaking of career wishes, we're going to explore tonight, should your career wish be to pursue a career in UX design or in its close cousin, content design? And to lead us through that discussion and to introduce us to our panel is actually a former SVC student, Laura Costantino. Laura is a senior content designer and strategist with Google, and she has now amassed about 12 years of experience in content, in marketing, in UX, not just for Google, but also Meta, Amazon, Yahoo, and as we like to say, companies that really have have some stature in the industry. So she's currently in New York, formerly from Italy. And I would suggest to anybody listening to this, go find Laura on LinkedIn, because they write a lot and write with some authority. And I would also say just some really interesting ideas that you've expressed. So if I read the data correctly, I think Laura has 10,000 followers now on LinkedIn. So you should become one of them. Anyway, Laura, thank you so much for leading us here tonight. And I'm going to hand this off to you. And thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Larry, and thanks for your kind words. I'm really excited about this event, one, because I know some of the people on this panel, and the ones that I don't know, I'm super excited to get to know better. And like Larry said, I'm a former student, so really thankful to SVC. I pivoted my career from marketing into content design, and SVC had a big part in that. So I'm not gonna waste like too much time telling you about me, because Larry gave you an introduction already, and I am gonna go ahead and ask our panelists if they can please introduce themselves, share their names, pronouns if they would like, and also what they do now and where. And we can start with you, Jonathan.
Sure. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for having me. I'm Jonathan McFadden. I'm a senior content designer at Shopify, he, him pronouns.
Great.
Okay, I'll jump in. Hello, I'm Amy Jimenez Marquez. I'm a VP of Experience Design at Zillow, and my pronouns are she, her. And I've been in this field for over 20 years.
I thought we were going to be called on, so but I'll go next.
The spotlight's freaking me out, by the way.
So my name's Dune, a longtime listener, first time caller. My pronouns are he, him. I am the VP of design at a small robotics company, Serve Robotics, last mile autonomous vehicle food delivery. And I've been in this industry for 25 years.
Wow.
Hi, I'm Dror Damanakam. I am head of UX research and product design at a little company in Seattle called Zonar Systems, where we are focused on commercial fleet logistics and management, essentially keeping people safe around big rolling pieces of metal. I don't like to say how long I've been in the industry. I'll just say I'm a level 31 UX person.
What does that even mean?
It feels better to me than saying I've been doing this for 31 years.
I think I'm last. So I'm Tracy Fontaine, and my pronouns are she, her. I am currently a staff content designer at TripActions, which is a late stage startup in the corporate travel industry. I come to this role from several years at Meta and a couple of years at Indeed prior to that. So I've been in content design for about 7 years, and in agency life a little bit before that. But then coming from a winding road of content and writing related jobs, including marketing and fundraising.
Awesome. Thank you, Tracy, for closing us off. This is really relevant. I know some of you have started speaking about how many years of experience you have, and that's going to lead us nicely into our next question, which is, I would love to know from each one of you a little bit about your career path, and especially how did you get into either UX design or content design? And I don't know, maybe you want to start us off, Tracy, since I have you in front of me right now.
Sure, I'm happy to. So I mentioned that I had a variety of writing roles. I studied linguistics and psychology in college, and it's the perfect combination for what I do now, but I didn't know of this work then. It wasn't intentional. It led me, I actually thought I would be a speech pathologist, but just did not enjoy the work as I started heading down that path. Which is when I started writing grant proposals for artists and cultural orgs. And so that just, yeah, sort of started this winding path. And I ended up at a nonprofit where I had an opportunity to work on a Salesforce customization project and started learning about workflows and user journeys and all the like sort of like little seeds of UX work there. So I intentionally then took a role at a digital agency where I was able to work on both marketing things. That was the marketing piece was what got me in their door, but then I was able to hone my skills on the UX side, working on app projects. They were kind of a destination for niche app projects. So I could work end to end on those apps and get lots of great experience, which then led me to Indeed. So I know there are a lot of transition folks out there, people who are interested in moving into this realm. So I wanted to mention that specifically because definitely lots of opportunities to move over onto this path, but it is helpful to kind of think through your current skills and your current work and how you might get those, like beef up those skills to move in this direction. Should I popcorn it?
Yes, please.
Okay. Amy is right next to me, so I'll go to her.
All right. I thank you for that solution too, because I'm like, how are we going to do this? So I've been in this industry. I was in design longer than I knew I was in design. Like when I was in college and undergraduate school, one of my odd jobs was working for the school newspaper. I went to Texas A&M and I worked on the battalion and I worked on their ads layout section where I would like take a mat knife and cut out little like icons for beer and stuff like that because it was college and lay them out on this sheet and then put it through a waxing machine that would, you know, help it to adhere onto this big template where they would then turn that into a page using one of the Macs that was like oblong and Quark Express. And I had no idea that that's what I was doing. I was practically a technophobe at the time, getting my theater major. I went on to get a master's in theater, which taught me I really didn't need that. And then I went to Hollywood, as one does, and worked in special effects for a while. And the creative director there was like, hey, you seem to be good with computers. Why don't you look up this web thing? And this was in the late 90s. And I was like, okay, I'll look up the web thing. And so I started taking tutorials on the W3C schools in HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and I was fascinated. I never thought there'd be anything I loved as much as I loved theater and film. But all of a sudden I could use formatted English to make this page do things, the screen, you know, do things. And from then on, I said, this is my job. And so I've just basically taken opportunities as they come along and said, okay, that's what I'm going to do. So, you know, several years into my career, I was at USAA and Amazon said, hey, we like what you're doing. Why don't you come up here and help us work on some stuff? I said, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And it was working on Alexa, helping to develop and shape her personality and how she interacts with people when it's on a more human basis. So I've got like that UX design background, information architecture, and voice content design in my history, and it's all very interrelated. I don't know how we're going to peel these separately apart because they go hand in hand. But that was a wonderful 4.5 years of my life working on this fascinating project that is, you know, an artificially intelligent virtual agent. Also helping them to stand up the Samuel L. Jackson voice. Very fun working with such a cussy interface. Never had to do that before. And then also I ran the teams that built the backend systems that enabled the content designers to put these experiences in, like the interactions back and forth in, without additional engineering effort. So working on systems design and, you know, service design and voice and UX, really enjoyed it. And now I'm at Zillow, where I am leading platform teams, helping create the next innovations for agents to make the lives of their buyers and sellers easier. And I'll popcorn that to Jonathan.
Thank you, Amy. Hey, everybody. So my career path, like Amy's, like Tracy's, was kind of a little windy. I started off as a journalist. I have a degree in mass communication. And similar to Amy, I got my start, cut my teeth in design, I guess, on the student newspaper. I was an editor and I had to lay out pages. And so while I didn't have to cut things out or anything or use an X-Acto knife, we did use computers and Adobe software. That in and of itself was a challenge. So it definitely helped me understand concepts like information architecture, how people perceive and work through experiences, how to lay out information, digital content. And so from there, like I said, became a newspaper reporter for about 5 years, covering everything from crime and public safety, fires, meth labs, murder, homicide. That was my jam. And then I moved over to county government and small business and entrepreneurship before I left the news business entirely and found myself in marketing. And that's where I became a copywriter. I did that for about 2 years at a mortgage company in the Charlotte area before I ended up getting a job as a content strategist at a fintech company. Had no idea what content strategy was. Looked at the job description and said, I think I can do this. And I managed to convince them that I could. And so I got the job, and that's really where my foray into UX began. And that was back in 2018. So not too far, not too long of a road for me, but that's when I began to realize that content strategy was this entire discipline and that microcopy was a thing and that, you know, people actually do this and it's an actual thing that you hone and finesse. And so I began to immerse myself in the community, read books and meet people, talk to people, go to meetups, go to conferences, really began to learn a lot about the industry and the craft. Made a move over to a company called Red Ventures, which is also based in the Charlotte area. Ended up leading the content team there for a line of business that was basically a joint venture between Red Ventures and another company. And we were working on what I consider this really cool and ambitious project where we would overhaul existing web experiences and rebuild them with a better UX. That really appealed to the architect inside me. So I really liked it. Didn't like some other things about it, so I left and wound up at Shopify, where I now work on Shop. And so I'm embedded in a couple of our product teams, spread over a couple of product teams, because as I'm sure we'll discuss, when it comes to as a content designer, you find your hand in multiple pots all the time. So yeah, it's been a really interesting experience. And so I will popcorn over to Dune to hear about his.
Thank you, thank you. Like all good stories, there is an origin story, right? And my origin story has to do with my dad. Double E, he invented the talking calculator in the 70s. So I learned to solder at a young age. I can solder like no one's business, and that taught me to tinker. As a technophobe, he wanted me to go into tech and learn to code. These are the days of COBOL and Fortran, and I didn't want to. So in my youthful rebelliousness, I chose to go into writing. I became an English major, and I thought the joke was on him. But you know, years later, here I am in tech, so joke's on me. But after graduating, I went abroad. I lived in Europe, Germany specifically, for 14 years, and met my wife there. And her dad had a traditional advertising company, and he knew that I was good with computers, and they needed somebody who wanted some CD-ROMs produced. He handed me a box, Macromedia Director, and said, can you learn this and make us some CD-ROMs, right? So I did. I taught myself LingoScript and taught myself Photoshop 3, and stepped into design. And found that I liked it. I liked what was happening on screen more than what was happening, behind the screen in code, and chose to step into what was still a pretty newly minted title, information architect, and became an information architect. Worked at companies like Sapient, Vodafone, for a number of years. I came over to the States in 2007 with Frog Design. Did a tour of duty with T-Mobile, Microsoft as a designer, Samsung. Did my own startup. I'm probably leaving out some other companies. Back to back to mobile with AT&T. A small Bellevue-based startup focused on data privacy and security. Smartsheet for a season. And now I'm back in a startup after I said I would never go back to a startup, but here we are. So that's me in a nutshell. My dad couldn't be happier. And who's left? Troy, did you go?
I think I'm the closer.
Yeah, you are the closer.
All right. I'll try and make this brief. In the beginning, the earth cooled. My origin story really starts in architecture school in 1990 in drafting class, where the drafting coach was walking around the room and he came up to me and was like, "What is that? Is that a 3? Is that a Q? Is that an M? You get that wrong, people die." I'm gonna go be a designer. I had switched majors to graphic design, and that was really the start. But what did it for me, and what still continues to motivate me throughout my career, and why I'm so passionate about mentoring now, is in the summer of 1991, when my folks moved up to Seattle. I had the summer free room and board, and I was like, what do I do? And my brother said, go find an internship somewhere. Okay, so it's summer of 91, summer of grunge in Seattle, woo! And I'm literally sitting in my parents' dining room with the phone and the Yellow Pages. I, of course, called the big 8 firms, all the advertising, McCann and Elstein and stuff, and they were like, no, we're all full up. No, we don't do internships. How did you get this number? Please stop calling. And I finally said, okay, I'm just going to go. This was my big scientific method. I'm going to go through the Yellow Pages and I'm going to look at who has a really well-designed Yellow Pages ad. I didn't know shit. I don't know what I was doing. But I came across this company called AdTech. They had looked like a good ad, so I called them, and a gentleman by the name of Terry Bodiger answered. And thanks for calling AdTech. This is Terry. How can I help you? And I filled him in on what I was looking for, and he goes, never thought about having an intern before. That's kind of an interesting idea. Why don't you come in and we'll talk about it? I said, okay. He says, oh, and bring your book. I'm like, oh, what? He goes, your portfolio, bring your book so we can see your work. Look, I don't have one. He goes, all right, come in anyway. Let's just talk. So we chatted, and he liked me, and I think to this day it's because he saw potential in me that I didn't recognize myself. And he took me on as an intern. At the time, I was a certified Mac tech for the university that I was working at, because that's how I was paying through college. And I traded computerizing the agency with all 3 people in exchange for a free internship. So I brought in the Mac 2 FXs and the SCSI drives and Photoshop 3 and all that crazy stuff. And it was a small firm, but we did that summer. We did some great work. We did work for Showbox and Croc Cafe, and we ran events in the summer of grunge. I had Chris Cornell sweat on me at the Ballard Firehouse. It was great. But at the end of that summer, he's like, "I'm sorry, you can't leave." Why not? Do I need an adult? He goes, "No, I need a junior art director, and I've already trained you." So he made me an offer, and that's how I got into the work. Stayed there for 3 years. Bounced around to a couple of other companies while I was trying to finish my degree. Which I ended up getting a degree in marketing of all things, because University of Washington wouldn't let me go into the design program because none of my credits were transferred. So I'm like, all right, Foster School of Business, great. Which was actually a great choice for me. Ended up opening up my own design shop with some colleagues from night school. Got picked up by .com in summer of 2000, which didn't last long, as we all remember. And then I jumped ship to Microsoft. And that's really where I discovered UX as a discipline. I started getting into it. But the funny thing is that I was working in the marketing spaces in Microsoft, so I was also doing a ton of content design and a ton of content-based wayfinding, and even helping marketing managers write headlines for various properties. So I've always felt a draw to the written word and storytelling. So it's what's driven me through in my UX career, is how am I telling a nonlinear story through this confluence of visuals and artifacts. So fast forward to now, I'm now at Zonar Systems. I'm heading up a team of about 13 people that are fantastic and wonderful to work with, and we're just trying to keep people safe. That's really the whole goal of it. That's it.
Thank you, everyone. I always love hearing origin stories because I think every designer, UX designer, content designer has usually like really interesting backgrounds. I am myself an Italian major, and then I have a background in film as well. So definitely really unique stories from everyone. I think people in our audience who join us are probably people, right, like who are trying to decide what their career path may be, whether they're starting out in their career or their career changes, like some of us have been. And so I was hoping that a couple of you may be able to give me a 3-minute summary of what we mean by UX design and what we mean by content design. And we can do just one person does UX design, one person does content design. And if anyone else wants to speak up, that's fine too. And I'm not gonna point my finger in this case.
I'm not gonna point fingers. All right, I'll be brave. I will dare greatly.
Thank you.
As my spirit guide Brene Brown says, and I will hasten definition of UX. Definition of UX is to anticipate customer needs and facilitate an optimal journey toward their desired outcome.
I'd like to yes and that if I could.
Please do.
It's also storytelling. If you tell a successful story of the customer's journey through whatever end-to-end experience they're trying to get through, they'll reach the conclusion that they need to. If they get lost in that story, you know something's broken in UX.
And so I'll kind of just jump in here from the content design perspective and say, content design is that as well. And if I may take some friendly aim at the title of the event, I don't think about it as UX design versus content design. Content design is UX design, so it's a bit of a misnomer. We're all designers, right? Content designers are maybe a little more focused or honed in on language, but ultimately we are working towards the same outcomes, the same goals, and a lot of the same tools, and a lot of the same headspace as our product design partners. So when it comes to thinking about how people are experiencing a certain interaction, when it comes to thinking about the cohesiveness of that story from end to end, content designers are right there, or ideally should be right there in the mix, working on the same things that their product design partners are working on as well. Our product design partners may work a little bit more, may focus a little bit more on the pixels, and we may focus a little bit more on the words, but ultimately we're focused on the same things, and that's making elegant, frictionless experiences for our users.
And if I could add on to what Jonathan said, for a profession where we are really obsessed with getting the labels of things right, we have no idea what to call ourselves. So, you know, in the discipline of UX, you have information architecture, taxonomy, content, research. Taxonomy is the funny one because there's not enough focus on it. And I think that's probably why we don't know what to call ourselves. Because some UX designers call themselves interaction designers, some of them call product designers, you name it.
100%. I think I couldn't agree more. And I am very happy in this room right now because it seems like from the start of this conversation that we're all agree, right, that UX design and content design are on pair with each other. And so, I do want to do a little bit of a aside just for our audience and clarify if, let's say, at least in this room, we mean, we agree that content design equal UX writing. And I am very much, yes, content design equals UX writing, at least for sure for the sake of this discussion. But I wanna make sure from everyone, if anyone disagrees or wants to add to that, please go ahead.
So
I can
I'll
add-
do the Jewish thing and go ahead.
Do it.
I'll do the Jewish thing and answer a question with a question. Do you feel as though UX writing and content design are still separate disciplines, or do you see UX writing, content design as kind of the natural evolution of what started as UX writing?
I'll sort of answer that with my my thoughts, I guess, but because I think that I think Amy might have touched on this a bit. I feel like there are so many labels floating around, and we are really bad at this. And companies are calling the same work different things, and so then that's confusing the community. If I really dig into it, I tend to personally think of UX writing as a piece of content design or a piece of UX design that is more tactically focused on the words. But the reality is that in life, in the real world, there are companies calling content design, like what I might call content design, they're calling that UX writing. And so there are many blurry lines around all of this. And I think it's important to really pay attention as you're looking at roles. Look at how the company is defining that role and what that entails, more than what the actual label has been slapped on it.
And I really, if I may, I really love, Tracy, what you said, or what Tracy said, excuse me, I don't want to crosstalk, what Tracy said about in the real world, because I think a lot of times when we're looking at best practices, or we're hearing from maybe industry leaders or people who are leading voices in the space, we might develop a little bit of a complex around what we're calling ourselves and how we should be working and how we should be engaging on product teams. And yeah, there is a preferred way of working and there is an ideal state, but reality sets in for a lot of us that sometimes, depending on the maturity of the UX practice at the company or the company's actual understanding of content design and product design, it may not, like what you're hearing from the conference stage may not actually be your experience. And that doesn't invalidate the work that you're doing. And I think that's something that I really want to emphasize, that yes, you may be joining a company as a content designer and finding yourself doing maybe a little more tactical UX writing work than you expected. That doesn't diminish your value. That doesn't mean you're not a UX writer. It doesn't mean you're not a content designer or a content strategist or a design thinker. It means that the company's expectations of your expectations and the company's expectations may not be meeting. And so it may also mean the onus may be on you a little bit to figure out how you can shift perception and perspective and kind of maybe demonstrate the breadth of the value that you bring to the table beyond the more tactical aspects of the work, which are great too. Don't get me wrong. Like I love the words. Don't get me, but also it's about also designing, right? It's about being strategic. And so again, I just want to emphasize that reality doesn't always look like how it looks like what we would imagine it looking like based on someone else's experience or someone else's expertise or what someone may have written in a book. It may look a little different for you, but that's okay. Like our journeys are unique to us and we're still part of this community. So you're still a designer.
That actually brings up a question for me. It's like, with this propensity of titles that float around and how we're trying to identify ourselves, I know I can think of several examples of this, but has anybody else experienced a growing trend of tribalism within design communities? I mean, I look at the title of this and it's like, that's a kind of an indication, like, can we all just get along? But I think that's part of the reason why Larry brought us together for this conversation.
And I'd hate to monopolize the conversation. As I've told Larry before, I ramble. So if you get me on something, I'm going to keep going until you tell me to shut up. But to Rory's question, yeah, I think there is some, and I'm not here to boo-boo on content or UX or anything. I love this work. And that's why I'm critical, right? Because I love it so much. But I do think sometimes there's this almost, it kind of feels like this elitist urge to ensure that we're not conflated with other writing adjacent roles. Like, oh no, I'm not in marketing. Please do not call me a marketer. Do not call me a content strategist. Like, no, I'm not. Don't you dare call me a writer. Personally, I'm not as precious about that as some people are. And I understand why, because a lot of times, as we've been saying, as the theme that's running through this entire panel right now is how important naming is to framing our understanding of concepts, right? And so what we call ourselves professionally helps define how people work with us. That said, I think there can be the risk of being so precious about the title is that we run the risk of gatekeeping. And so we erect this really high barrier to entry to people that if you don't have a traditional product background, we won't even talk to you. Like you have no chance of even getting in the door if you don't come from these lists of companies. If you're not Meta, Indeed, Shopify, this or whatever, then there's no way you could do this work, which is not true. I'm sorry, a lot of these skills that you get from journalism, from theater, from counseling, from anthropology, art, psychology, transferable, will make you an amazing UX practitioner. So I do think there is a degree of tribalism, gatekeeping, and like, oh, we have to protect the integrity of the discipline. But I think the irony in that is that our discipline purportedly advocates for inclusion and accessibility, and yet we're like, no more of you. So I am glad that we have events like this, because this does lower the barrier to entry and it does make it a lot more accessible for people.
Yeah, this is definitely a pretty heated topic. I see that you have your hand raised, Dune, so I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I agree. Yes, and to everything that we're talking about, and that there is the lack of clarity around some of these terms and titles. But I think that's what bothers me with content design. UX writing at least is clear, right? For me, UX writing is the design system of words, where content design goes beyond words. It can include video. It can include images. So as a UX writer, I would probably think that working with these other media types is outside of my scope of work, right? So I like UX writing because it's clear, it's about what it's about. Content design for me is much more akin to content strategy, right? Where you're looking at all different types of content, video, audio, words, whatever, and trying to figure out how to display, how to utilize, how to leverage those different pieces of content in a way that is in line with the customers or the users' goals. So if I think about that, it doesn't have anything to do with writing. It's about thinking about the value of content, its unique properties, the way you would need to interact with it, the manipulation of it, etc. Right? So, but Dror, you said your mileage may vary. Read the description, right? Read the description of the jobs. And if it's someone saying content designer, but it sounds like UX designer, they could use your help, right? Because that's already part of the problem. There isn't the clarity.
Yeah, and I mean, really, at the end of the day, I think the point of this event, is one, helping people kind of make a decision, and not putting the two disciplines, of course, against each other, but also getting I want to start getting into the really like the core of what it means to get a job in one or the other, like either or potentially I'm sure there are places where a UX designer, let's say, does everything, right? This person may be a researcher, a designer, a writer, all the things together, an information architect. And so thinking about that, let's start maybe talking a little bit about skill sets and practical things. And my question is, in terms of skill sets, what's the overlap between UX design and content design? And I know we got into that a little bit already, but maybe someone wants to add to that. And feel free to raise your hand if that's an easier way to jump into the conversation, or just unmute and talk. So I see Amy, go ahead.
Yeah, so in content design, as in UX design, you have to take context into mind first and foremost. Like, where is the person using this piece of software going to be when they're using it? So a lot of people like argue content first in design, or mobile first, or whatever. But really, for me, both content design and UX design need to take into account the context in which the person is approaching this particular interaction. Like, I don't know, like I would get emails at Amazon like, "Hey, we need more fart jokes." I mean, that's the kind of job. I mean, there's a lot more complexity to it, but they would say the fart jokes are stale. But if we were approaching it and we're like, okay, well, what is somebody thinking when they're, because that's both UX design, like an interaction back and forth, and content design. What are they thinking when they ask for it? What are they expecting? What might they follow it up with? And oftentimes that was, tell me a poop joke. But just thinking your way through all of that, I don't think there's a lot of difference, especially when you strip the visuals away from voice interaction. There's not a lot of difference between content design and UX design.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I think that, oh, sorry, I'm gonna just talk right over you, Jory. Excuse me.
Ladies first.
I think that's a good point in terms of also not just understanding the user's context, but understanding the general context of your company's work and your product's work. So what you might do on, working on Alexa, who's going to now talk to me, is the same thing. It's not necessarily the same thing, specifically the same thing as, me working on travel booking workflows. However, the sort of concepts behind it, the design thinking, the understanding of that interplay between the customer and the product, or the user and the product, the thinking behind that journey and the conversations they're having in their mind. There are a lot of similarities, but and I think we don't tend to think of it that way. But I'm actually trying to get my team to think about it more in that way of like that actual physical conversation. It's just, and I think probably many of the writers out there are like, have asked someone, is this how you would explain it to your grandmother? Is this how you would talk to your neighbor? Kind of getting at those conversational elements. So I do think that there are like all these root pieces, but you have to consider too, like when looking for a job, the role is going to adapt based on the size of the company, the scope of the company, the scale of the work, the resources that are available to you. And so that's why I say, like, think about the job description, but also inquire beyond that, because sometimes companies don't really even understand their own job descriptions. So I think one of the main skills, crossover skills in this work, is inquiry. Use it right from the start. And as you're having a conversation about the job, find out more.
Yeah, that's why I'm going to give a big yes and to Tracy. I mean, like, it's actually one of the things that I learned from my dad very early on. He said, don't be the person in the room with all the answers. Be the person in the room with all the questions. Learn how to ask really good questions. Learn how to do precision questioning. And the thing I tell candidates who are looking for a job all the time is that, remember, this is a two-way conversation. Ask them whether the questions that help you decide whether they're a good fit for you. Like, you need to determine whether they meet your standards as well as the other way around. And it's one of the reasons why, at least at Zonar, with our hiring practice, we've actually moved away from looking at specific what's traditionally called hard skills, which I hate the hard skills thing. Can we stop that, please? We look at things more in terms of POV, their ability to present well, their ability to communicate well, their passion for the discipline. One of the biggest things that I've seen a lot is you have people like, yeah, I went, got a job at this, and I was going, as an engineer, I hated it, so I thought I'd try this UX thing. No, you're a tourist. Tell me why you feel compelled to pursue the career you want to pursue. The other thing for both content and UX, do your homework, do some research, be curious, be skeptically curious, challenge the things that you may trigger your spidey sense and go, that's weird. I wonder why that is. Or is that really how it is? So it's really about being willing to step forward and challenge what the assumptions are. And I think that speaks also to the common skill that I feel makes people successful more than anything. And this is where this is not an original idea. I'm quoting Angela Duckworth, but she's right. Grit is the thing that makes you more successful in anything. Grit and resilience. If you don't have those, it's going to be really hard for you in any tribe, in any organization, especially with the role of a content designer, the role of a solo designer. If you're a solo designer and you're working with 50 developers, yeah, you're going to have a thick skin, and you're going to have to get used to saying the same thing 100 times until somebody listens.
I want to counterpoint that really quick, in that the most toxic companies I've been in have told me to have grit and resilience. So yes, it is a skill you definitely need, but if you have people at that company telling you need it, that might be a warning flag.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because to me, that means they lack empathy, that they want you to suck it up and do it.
That's interesting to think about it that way. It's almost like
Yes,
it's a leading indicator of toxic culture, hustle culture, as it was. Yeah.
I will also say that happens at both very small and very large companies. It's not necessarily a factor of being the one designer to 50 engineers. It can happen just as commonly in well-resourced communities where they're pushing super hard to get the most out of their employees without having empathy and compassion for you, which I think is super important as as someone in UX.
But I can tell you personally, after having like a couple of years of a manager who every one-on-one we had literally tried to make me cry each time, after about a year and a half of this, he goes, you really have a lot of grit. It's pretty cool. So yeah, big warning flag to me.
Interesting.
Yep.
Thank you.
I'll say like a little bit of a +1 on resilience. Like some of these things that we talk about are, for me, like as a word person, I think of them as words that should define more of a moment or a situation, not a lifestyle. So if it is going to become a lifestyle, that's where it becomes problematic.
So maybe also be resilient, know when to let go, have boundaries, and don't let people tell you to be resilient and have grit. Just to summarize really quickly. But yeah, thanks everyone. I know that skill set is a big discussion, and the next topic I'm gonna get into, I think it's another pretty, at least like in my experience, has been sort of like controversial. And I would like to talk about portfolio, because I remember when I started in design and I was transitioning from marketing, for me, the biggest hurdle was, what the heck am I going to put in this portfolio? What is a portfolio? What do I have to do, et cetera, et cetera. And so I would like to hear from everyone and see, if there is any difference in the responses, and I'm sure there's going to be. What do you like to see in a portfolio, whether it's a content design or a UX design portfolio? And if you can maybe specify if there's a difference for you or not. And yeah, if anyone wants to raise their hands to start, I'd appreciate that.
Okay, I'm gonna start. Oh, no, Don.
Oh,
Sorry, go
yeah.
ahead. Go ahead. You go.
Well, what do I like to see? You know, having been a hiring manager for lots of different years over different companies, I get a lot of people telling me that they're a designer, but not why. And you know how it is. You get a short list of candidates to look at. You open all their portfolios, and they all say, "Hi, I'm so and so. I'm a UX designer," right? And so the way I've talked to people about it is that you've got 5 to 10 seconds to convince me to spend 5 to 10 minutes on your portfolio. Because usually I'm doing it at lunch. I've got a sandwich in one hand and my mouse in the other, right? So what I'm looking for is a point of view. I want something different. I want you to not tell me that you're a UX designer, because by the time I've received your application, that you've applied to a job as a UX designer, I know you're a UX designer. I've looked at your resume, your LinkedIn profile, your portfolio, your Twitter, your Instagram, your TikToks. I probably know, right? So it is a little bit of the old adage, tell me something I don't know. And it's a little bit of like having your own brand statement. What are you about? What are you known for? And if you can articulate that in a clear and concise way, if you've done a good job at content writing, UX writing about yourself, I guess, then that was what I look for. Because otherwise, the onus is on me to dig. I got to dig and dig and dig to see if maybe you're the right person.
Yeah, storytelling for sure. Tell your story in a compelling way. I have Jonathan next.
Yeah, I co-sign with everything Dune said, in terms of telling the story about yourself, but also telling the story about what you've done and your impact. And so while I realize that many people on this call may not have a lot of that real world experience where they've been able to utilize a company's resources to run research and to run experiments and work cross-functionally with people in other disciplines, I think there is an opportunity, no matter what level or what fidelity your work is at, that you can frame that story in a way that makes it seem as if you've done a really good job thinking through things. And that's honestly what people are looking for, at least in my experience. They want to know how you think, and they want to know how you solve problems. And if you can illustrate that in a really compelling way that uses like, okay, here is a problem statement, here is a proposal, here's what we did, here's what I did specifically, and here was the outcome. Like those are kind of, from at least from a content designer's perspective, at least, those are the things that that hits it. Those hit the main levers that we're looking for, because that's how you're going to be working. And that's how you can demonstrate the way you think and approach a problem and solutions. It doesn't have to be, I mean, again, this is my opinion. I don't think it doesn't have to be this beautifully designed, sleek, clean, like work of art. It needs to come chock full of the facts. Like I need to know, I need the information. But it could be in bullet points. That's fine. Like, just give me the nuts and bolts of it and let me know like what you actually did, and why this was successful because of your involvement and your contribution. How influential were you? Did you have some stakeholder wrangling you had to do? Did you have pushback that you had to respond to? Did you push back? Did you have to negotiate? Like all of those are juicy details that I would love to see in more portfolios. Like give me a little bit of the nitty gritty behind the scenes drama, because that not to like rehash that conversation about grit and resilience, but that does give me some insight into how you can like maneuver some really murky conversations and murky situations, because you're going to run into that kind of complexity and ambiguity all the time. So that's my advice. I mean, I think I would love to see more of that kind of storytelling in a portfolio. I think, yes, the brand statement, tell me who you are, tell me about yourself. It's very important. You're human, so be human. But also, like, as you're talking about your work, your contributions, what you've done, the impact you've made, like give us the juice, like give us the tea, like make us want more, make us like, it's a story. So think about how you read books. What kind of books do you like to read? Typically, they're packed with drama, they're packed with a problem, they're packed with a crisis. Like, paint the portrait for us so we get all the details and we walk away feeling like, oh, okay, I feel confident in this person's ability to really solve an issue.
Amy?
All right. Yeah, just adding on to what they said, because obviously this is all really great stuff. I'm going to bring us back to context, like, who is your audience in your portfolio? Your online portfolio, the audience is a recruiter, probably, potentially a hiring manager, potentially a senior designer. You want to craft that online portfolio to speak to them. You want to show them your enthusiasm. You want to show them your process. Like, if you can't show me a lot of pictures about what you're doing, tell me how you did it. And make sure all of your best work is up front, because I'll probably just get to one or two in our limited time in our jobs, one or two of them. Put your best stuff up front. When you're in person giving a portfolio presentation, this is not the time to be humble and tell them about that place where you really tanked, because that's a good story, but not for interviewing. So give them a story where maybe there was challenges, but you overcame them like a boss. And just, again, think about who you're presenting to, because your portfolio is not for you, and it's not for your friends, and it's not to impress other designers. It's for, number one, a recruiter, number two, a hiring manager.
And Drory, I see your hand up, but also I saw your comment about your resume, LinkedIn, and portfolio being your Greek chorus. As someone who studied Greek at high school, I love that. So I'm
just trying to keep up with all that. Like, Amy Johnson covered most of the topics. I would say that I were trying to dig on anything valuable that I can add to that. Context is great. Understanding the why behind what you did is great. I would say that, to the point that Amy made, which is really awesome, know your audience. I don't waste time explaining fundamental methods and practices that your audience will already know way more about than you do. Like, you don't have to explain to them what a card sort is. If you're doing this, I mean, if you have a client, if you have a website for freelance work, have that be a separate story. That's a completely separate audience, and they may need to understand why card sorting is important in the context of doing user research. You don't need to over-explain that to the audience for the hiring process. And to Dune's point about, like, we've maybe got 5 minutes to look at your stuff and maybe 9 other people. Yes, I agree. Amy, put your best stuff forward, even if it's only 2 pieces. Quality over quantity, and don't overwrite. I mean, if you look at my website from like 5 years ago, you're like, you write novels. There's a huge amount of content, and like, you have walls of words. I'm like, yeah, if I did it now, I probably would have done it differently. But use the work and use the visuals to help, anchor that story. And I think for me, in the spirit of what Jonathan said, that like, shows how you think, I don't really care how they do the work. I care how they think the work. And what kills me most is to see portfolios like, well, I did this, and then I did this, and I did this, and I did that. Like, okay, I don't care about the how. Show me how the decisions that you made led you to this path or the other path. So, bunch of yes ands. Let's move on.
So continuing our discussion on portfolio, I know we mentioned the, hi, I am a X designer. Is there anything else that you're absolutely like tired of seeing, or feel like it's not necessary, that you're very much like, I can't see these anymore? And a lot of like students, or I don't know, career changers, maybe, oh, I've seen it everywhere else, so I need to add it myself. And
I'll jump in with a career changer thing because I see this a lot. Don't disrespect or talk down your legacy. Don't say like, I hated engineering, because it makes me wonder what you're going to say about UX or content design when you get tired of this. So respect the legacy that you come from, because that's what is interesting to me. I've hired people that come from a sociology background and, hired an anthropology major, and they have this really unique perspective of how they look at things. And it brings that diversity of thought to my tribe that, I may not have gotten if I was like, yeah, I've been a lifelong designer. I've been drawing since I was 2 and I did this and I designed my first app at 10. Great. Okay. That's fantastic. But, I love those alternate perspectives of how am I going to look at this from a point of like socioeconomics? Oh, let's talk about that.
Yeah, and I have to say, that was something that was like really relevant to me putting together my own portfolio, because I really did not want to discount the 10 years of experience I had in the professional world anyway. But I see your hand, Dune, so please go ahead.
We're still on the topic of what else do we not want to see?
Yes.
I don't want to see any more kitchen sink portfolios. I don't want to see any more. Like when you move, you've got that box of knickknacks, and you've got it in the garage, and you keep putting stuff into it, and you don't want to get rid of it, and you never take anything out. A lot of portfolios I've seen are like that, right? So your portfolio does not have to be the end-all, be-all representation of your entire career, right? I think what you're trying to communicate isn't that you've done a bunch of shit over 25 years and these are all the companies that you've worked at. It's about explaining what your unique selling proposition is. Why you over 15 other people? And you don't have to go into every case study, kind of to Rory's point, and break down the UX process, the UCD process for every stinking case study, right? Heck, put it in a section and reference it and say, I know Double Diamond, right? I know Triple D or Triple I, whichever the flavor is, and that lets you focus in on the true value that you brought to a particular initiative or project. So the other thing I'd say is you should always have a portfolio, and your portfolio doesn't have to do all the heavy lifting throughout your entire interview process. Like I have a light portfolio online that's very easy for me to maintain, but when I interview, I have an in-person portfolio which goes into a lot more detail, more screens, more detail, different stories. So kind of to the Greek chorus analogy, it all works together, right? Everything works together. Your LinkedIn profile, your resume, your Twitter, whatever. It all kind of are different digital impressions of who you are. So no more kitchen sink portfolios.
And if I could maybe just say one more thing, and this is not a counterpoint, but I do want to couch this a little bit, that if you are starting off, you may not be able to do all of that. Like you may have a lot of things you want to throw in there because you're trying to figure out what sticks, what resonates, what hooks people. Careers are long, and as you continue to work and as you get more opportunities, you'll find a lot more chances to winnow it down and to whittle it down and to figure out what belongs and what doesn't belong. If you're just starting out, it may be challenging to implement all of that. It's very sound what you're saying. I'm not disagreeing, but
contextualize it, right? I mean, just because you don't have a lot of work, putting a bunch of work in there still doesn't sell you any better, right? You need to contextualize the work and still use it to explain what you're good at. What do you kick ass at? Even if you're a mid-career switcher who has 15 years of experience in a different field and is now a UX designer, how do you redeem and contextualize, what you're good at? even with the few projects that you can put online.
In case people aren't in the comments, I just want to kind of highlight a comment that Jory made about your work representing what you want to do next, not necessarily what you've done previously. And I think that thinking about, if you're a transitioner, thinking about the ways that your previous work, be very intentional about selecting things that that do tie into your future vision of what you want to be doing, can be really impactful. Rather than just being, just listing out the things you've done. Well, that's great, but like, help me connect the dots between what you've done and what you want to do. And, I may be great at that, but a lot of people aren't. And so, especially recruiters who don't always totally really understand these fields and this transition. So serve it up.
Right. And to add to that, Tracy, it involves a certain level of self-awareness of why you're on the path you're on. Like, I did not know when I was getting my bachelor's in theater and just in love with theater, how much that background would help me in my job throughout my entire career. And it took me probably 10 years into my career for me to go, oh, that wasn't a wasted degree. That's been super helpful. And now I just see it every day in the way I collaborate, in the way I work with teams, in the way we approach designs. Look back at everything that's brought you to this point and realize that you were unintentionally drawing a map to here, and draw where you want to go next.
I think that's a beautiful sentence to actually at least close this part of the discussion on portfolio, because I'm sure we could talk about it for a while. And, we look a little bit at the negatives, like what not to do or what we've seen too much of. But is there any like good resource that, someone who's like working on their first portfolio maybe considering, whether it's something more DIY or more like formal training?
I dropped a link earlier in the chat. I actually give a talk about this, so I'll drop it one more time, about the online portfolios and portfolio presentations, if anybody wants to look that up. And I'm happy, like, if you want to ping me on LinkedIn, happy to answer questions.
That's awesome. That's super helpful. I am gonna watch that myself. So maybe moving along, unless someone wants to add anything about portfolio, we can like start moving along onto sort of like my next topic. If no one wants to add anything. I think one big discussion, at least that I see on LinkedIn, is often around entry-level positions. And so I would like to see if there are any thoughts around entry-level jobs in UX design or content design, entry-level or internships. And yeah, let's start there.
I think the important part about finding entry-level jobs, first of all, companies like the big tech companies like Amazon and Apple and Google often do not have entry-level jobs. They might have internships, but not entry-level jobs, because they don't have time for, they are running really lean, and they don't have time for their senior designers to mentor up. It's a huge mistake on their part, huge, which is why I don't want to work there at this point. But look at financial institutions, look at healthcare institutions, look at highly regulated spaces that have a lot of constraints on design, because that's going to make you, first of all, they are looking for entry level. They are looking for interns, and they have a lot of senior designers there who are just waiting to mentor someone. And if you work in a highly constrained design space, regulatory constrained design space first, it will really help you to get creative about how you design. And after a couple of years there, you can go anywhere and design anything.
Any thoughts on content design? Maybe I'm a little bit partial here, like entry-level jobs in content design, Tracy or Jonathan?
Yeah, I can speak to it a little bit. I mean, I think that at some of the big companies, that is where if you're in school now and you're thinking about this, be very intentional about looking for those internship opportunities. But those are really going to be for probably rising seniors, maybe rising juniors, and they are, you know, definitely a great way to get in the door. But they're limited to college students generally. And so if that's not your scenario, then that's not, you know, just don't even try to knock on that door, because there are very strict rules around it. On the flip side too, so I've kind of gone, you know, from one extreme to another, like going from Indeed, where I was the first UX writer, to one of 500 at Meta, and now I'm back to one again. And so I think though that my advice is actually finding that space in between, because when it's just me, just one, my next hire, as we start to grow our team, probably isn't going to be entry level, because we're so constrained at this point, and I need someone with some experience. But once I get 2 or 3 folks on the team, then I absolutely will be interested in having entry level folks join the team. Because I think it's, you know, I've worked with really great new grad hires, and in the large company cases where they're just, you know, bringing so much great perspective to the table. So I want that in my company, but at the same time, I have to think about the trade-offs of the time and the energy and the piece that I really love in terms of coaching, but having the time myself to do that. So my advice is to look for those companies that are a little bit in the in-between space, like at least have a few folks on board already, and they have then the time and space to mentor and coach folks into the role.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I think this is basically in the same realm that Amy was talking in, but finding some of those more those maybe lesser known companies that, like a Red Ventures, like a startup, like a fintech org or something like that, that has, like Tracy is saying, has that in-between staffing, but also has maybe a lot more bandwidth and interest in actually bringing along people and cultivating a talent pipeline, and maturing people through a discipline, or even starting a discipline or growing and expanding it. I am definitely an advocate for more junior level roles. I don't like the high barrier to entry that I see happening in content design right now. It's, to me, completely ridiculous. That said, it's pervasive. And so I think finding, you know, maybe, I don't want to say lowering expectations, maybe tempering that, okay, maybe I'm not going to start off at Google, or maybe I'm not going to start off at Amazon, but that's okay. Like, you can start off doing this work in a place that maybe isn't this like sterling example of like product acumen in the minds of the people who are gauging your resume and portfolio, but still gives you the chops and the skills and the dexterity to do the work and to put some stuff in your portfolio and to get the experience that you need so that you continue to snowball in your career, and then you find yourself moving from one place to the next. So it's all about kind of finding the experience where you can get it. Again, like for me, I fell into this, you know, I wasn't intentionally looking for my way into UX. It kind of just happened. Does everybody see that?
Sorry, that was me.
No worries. So, you know, everyone's experience and everyone's journey is different, but don't discount, like we've been saying, don't discount all the other experience you've already amassed. If you're not a college student, if you've been working your career for 10 plus, 15 plus, 20 plus years, all of that's relevant. You can find ways to weave that story so you can tell that story about yourself and convince these people why you should have the opportunity. It may not be at Amazon. I don't know if it'll be at Meta. I have no idea, but it might be at a Red Ventures. It might be at a Lending Tree. It could be at a Movement Mortgage or wherever, like these, again, no name places that everyone's not talking about on LinkedIn, and that's okay. That's still experience. So don't discount those. Actually, maybe seek those out first.
Yeah, and right. I don't want to say that we're assuming that everybody wants to work at a tech company, because that's absolutely not true. Like, I was really happy working at USAA, which is like a member services focused financial and insurance institute. Really happy. And I wasn't looking for it. And, but this is where places like Amazon go to look at people who have established a good career at lesser known companies, where they look for talent. And now that so many people are working remote, I mean, you could work at almost any fintech, or Jonathan, like you were saying, any of these smaller companies. And, if your goal is to work at Amazon, if your goal is to work at Google, then yeah, absolutely. But some of these companies have such a good culture there that you wouldn't want to trade that for 10 jobs at Amazon.
I just want to clarify too, like one point, which is that when I say entry level, I was really like referring to closer to new grad hires. So you don't have work experience yet. You don't have, like that real world experience. Meta does have room for transitioners. There are a lot of people coming from journalism, from other content careers. There definitely is room for that transition there. If you can demonstrate that you understand that like what we were talking about before, the map that got you to this place in time. But in terms of being just brand new to the work life, that's much harder. And so that's particularly where I would encourage you to look to the smaller companies. And I am +1 to like financial institutions, insurance agencies, or insurance companies, and 100% on the regulatory piece, because that will serve you tremendously.
Yep, I'll yes and that to what Tracy and Amy said. Surprisingly, a lot of what I've been experiencing with some of the entry-level people I've been had the opportunity to mentor is that they're starting to find jobs in the government sector, in like with either nonprofits or NGOs. Some of them, like one of them went and worked at City of Seattle. So Seattle municipalities, they're starting to embrace digital more and more. They're building very silently these really, really large, robust, and diverse design teams and UX teams. And it's like, I was like, really? That's cool. Okay. So there's an opportunity if you're able to kind of broaden your lens. I mean, even if it's just looking at going beyond the labels and saying, okay, to Jonathan's point, like, you want to be a content designer, but okay, they have an entry-level UX writer. Go apply for that. Go talk to them about that, and talk to them in the perspective of, I see that you need a UX writer. What is the plan long term for how you're supporting UX writing and content design in the organization? Inquire about their long-term growth goals and see, like, because that sends the message to the hiring manager, like, oh, this person's thinking long term. You may also look at adjacent opportunities. Maybe there's no UX writing or content design with this organization. You see they have a product design team, but they also have a marketing team, and they are hiring entry-level copywriters. That may be a way to get your foot in the door with a company that you really are passionate about. In fact, one of my friends a while back did this with Dropbox, and started as a copywriter and is now working over in content design. And it's all about looking for those opportunities where you can say, okay, let me get in and then make friends with the people that I want to work with eventually.
I can't believe it, but we're approaching the end of this event. So I want to make sure we get some questions from the audience. Feel free to, I'd say, either post them on the chat, raise your hand and ask them yourself, or just unmute yourself and speak up. I'll wait, a few seconds to maybe a minute top. Otherwise, I'll keep asking questions. But please, if you do have a burning question, again, feel free to post it in the chat or raise your hand right now. And there may be questions from before, but I tried to follow the chat as well, but I may have missed them. So feel free to repost them right now. Okay, I do see a question. Okay, So I have a question from Nicole. How do you identify what is interesting about your story versus what to maybe not discuss? So what's interesting about your story
Mimi.
versus what not to discuss? Oh yeah, go ahead, Jory. Sorry.
I'll echo the advice that a friend of mine gave me when I asked him, how do I become a better writer? He said, you do it. And then you give it to people that you trust, and they'll be honest with you. And they'll tell you how much it sucks, and they'll tell you how to make it suck less. And you do it again until it doesn't suck. Like one of the exercises that I've done in the past with design students is who's your partner, who's your friend, who knows you best in this classroom. Okay, partner up together, write each other's about mistakes. Write it for the other person because they know you well and they're going to be more likely to sing your praises and pick out things that you may not even consider saying about yourself. And they'll also edit for you.
Oh, Amy.
Yeah, to add on to that, what sparks your passion? What really like puts a light in your eyes, regardless of the topic that you've worked on that you can bring into a portfolio review? It's that excitement that makes things interesting. It's that you're passionate about something, like if you were self-taught in something because you just were so interested in it. Seeing that passion and that desire to grow and learn and to seek it out yourselves, that's always really interesting.
Oof, lots of questions coming in. So I have a question. How much would you value accessible design on a portfolio or resume?
Accessible design to me is extremely important. It should be baked into your designs. And I will ask questions very specifically and pointedly about accessibility if I see issues where I think something doesn't quite look accessible.
And then one other question, if you could give one piece of advice to new grads, if you could give one piece of advice to new grads entering the workforce, what would it be? Sorry, it's getting late for me, I think.
All right, I'll go again. If you work someplace that won't let you make your job what you need it to be for you as well as for them, start looking for a different job. That's my advice.
Rory.
Yeah, Amy said it really well. I could sum it up as you are not your work and your work is not your worth. Let your work stand or fall on its own merits. Be authentic with how you present yourself. And the tribe that sees the value in you will snatch you up.
And I would say, be kind to yourself and give yourself grace. Work can be hard and careers can be hard and dealing with people is hard. And as a new grad, you may feel this urge to get into a company and dominate, to prove your value and to show how worthy you are and how they made a really great decision. And so you might feel the temptation to overwork and to burn yourself out. It's not worth it. Don't do that. It's going to take time to adjust and to adapt. And that's okay because you're human and you should be allowed to be human. You want to do a good job. You want to make an impact, but you don't want to drive yourself into the ground doing it. So that's my advice.
I have a question here. Are we over cover letters?
Yes.
No.
I can't
honestly,
remember the last time
I will.
It
I
depends.
will never read a cover letter.
It depends.
Yeah, it does depend. It depends on the role. We actually had a candidate come through for a director role in engineering, and the interview panel was like, it was really refreshing to see somebody, respect the fine art of cover letter, and it was a really well written letter, and that's actually what got him in the door. that they would have not otherwise looked at it. But again, it's your mileage may vary. Is it important for entry level? Maybe, maybe not.
Plus, some of the sites require it, right? Or they don't require it. There's a space for it, and then you wonder what happens if I don't upload one, right? Will that reflect badly? So I just have one ready.
Yeah, I
Okay.
never. If I apply for a job and they require a cover letter, I just say talk to me and submit.
So this may be a long question, but hopefully we're asking, with the current state of layoffs and hiring freezes, how do you see these impacting the current UX design job market, short-term and long-term? Maybe we can try to keep it brief.
Can you repeat that question, Laura?
Absolutely. Sorry, I'm trying to go quick, but so the question is around layoffs and hiring freeze. How do you see those impacting the design job market, both short-term and long-term?
So I can answer, having worked, I worked right before Zillow, worked for Compass, which had layoffs, and it was because of bad business decisions, not because of anything like the people there were doing as far as, you know, the people working. Right now is a great time to go into a more stable companies. Areas not impacted generally in times like this are banks, health insurance companies, especially if they're like Medicaid HMOs and Medicare HMOs, do great. Just look at the financial profile and ask hard questions. If you're interviewing with somebody, ask them, how do you plan to profit this? How does your company plan to profit this year? What is your model for earning income? How sustainable is this? Like, do a little research. Like I interviewed with a bunch of startups where I had some hard questions for them and they did not have good answers. So I was like, nope, I'm gonna nope out of that and go for something more stable.
So unless someone wants to add something, we are actually at time, and I want to make sure I leave some time if anyone wants to stay for Larry to talk about the design programs at SVC. But I also, of course, want to leave, a minute to thank everyone. This was an amazing panel. I really hope the people who were able to join us from, I think, really all sorts of places, not just in the US, but in the world. I'm pretty sure I saw Indonesia somewhere. I didn't follow the chat too much. I apologize, but I get distracted easily. So, but this was really, really insightful for me, for sure. And I hope it was for everyone else. Thank you very much, everyone. It was great meeting you. Yeah, I'm gonna pass it on to Larry for whoever wants to join, or I mean, more than join, sorry, stay. And good night, everyone, and good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whatever that may be.
If I may just say before, some of you probably need to go, but Laura, Drory, Jonathan, Amy, Tracy, Dune, I'm in love with all of you. And I'd like to do this again, only we'll book 4 or 5 hours next time. Is that okay? We can do that? Or maybe we go over to one of your houses for dinner.
As long as we're allowed to drink.
Sure, of course. This was spectacular. And I'm so grateful to all of you for your time and wisdom. And as you can see from the chat here, there's a lot of love coming your way, but also there were a lot more questions coming your way that we unfortunately didn't get a chance to answer. Anyway, thank you so much. Have a good evening. If anybody does want to stick around, I'm going to do 5 minutes on our certificate programs. If not for you, maybe for somebody who's seeking your advice about how do I learn to get into this field. So if you got to go, good night. If you can stay, hello. And we'll be wrapping completely here at 7:06. Bye. Saying goodbye. Okay. Thank you, stayers, for staying. Let me share my screen with you for just a sec. So here's the story, and I'm going to make this super rapid because there's plenty of ways to find out more about this. So yes, we have a certificate program here that is a hybrid, and oh boy, thank goodness, because it maps exactly to what you just heard from the panel, which is there's not a great deal of difference between UX design and content design / UX writing. And so what you'll see here is that most of the coursework is done in common, no matter which specialty area you choose. So that top line, those are 5-week evening classes that everybody takes. The second line are specialty classes just for those pursuing a UX design portfolio. And the third row is for those just pursuing a content design portfolio. So subtle differences, but you're going to wind up with portfolios and work samples, more importantly, that will speak to the direction you want to go. Fourth line, those are Saturday workshops. So the whole bit here behind SVC, if you're in North America, you can take classes at night for the most part. They run from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Pacific time, or these Saturday workshops, which are from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Saturdays, and they run 2 consecutive weeks. So 2 Saturday mornings per quarter is all we need to ruin your weekend. And then the fifth line are some 90-minute career talks helping you for job prep. So if you want to study this in more detail, it's on our website. Be happy to tell you more about it. But the point is, we have been doing this since 2016, and we do it in very small cohorts. So the largest cohort is 20. We've done one as small as 8. And the whole point of that is we want you to get to know those instructors, because they are the golden ticket. They're all working professionals. You could see from the panel, these are some pretty senior folks. They are many times they're hiring managers. And if they like what they see in you, they just sort of scoop you up and take you to work with them. So that's why you don't see a huge volume here. We haven't even had 300 certificates issued through this program yet. Right now, and probably for the foreseeable future, our programs are live. We don't make you watch videos on your own time. We assemble as a group, and so that's good. And then they're also 100% online. So no matter where you are, and I know one of you is in Nepal in its morning, see, this would work out okay. If you're at all interested and want to find out more about this, we're going to be doing an info session, in fact, a couple of them, for the cohort starting up in January. So we're going to be doing one next Wednesday, early evening. Well, actually, same time as this. And you can sign up for that at svcseattle.com/certificate. And then there'll be another one 8 days later on a Thursday. And then I think we're going to add a Saturday morning session here a little later in November. So I would love to tell you more about it. And that's the best way, is just to drop in on one of our certificate program info sessions, or go hit up this webpage, and you'll see there you can either sign up for the info sessions or get access to a bunch of videos, even though we don't like asynchronous videos, that will tell you about kind of much of the same material that we do at the info session. So there, I made it. I stuck to 5 minutes. I really appreciate your coming tonight and all the great questions that you asked, and hope that you got what you wanted out of this. And we'll say good night. And again, thanks so much for coming. It was wonderful to have you.